Steer ball.
Hello there. I'm the goalpost. Today we are talking about the top QBs scaled from the 2000s, 00 to 09. What is scale? Well, we take our two stats, quarterback volume efficiency rating, or QVER, and our offensive efficiency rating for position players and measure them strictly by how they stacked up against their competition year by year. The top guy always gets a 1 for the year, whether his number was 4 or 400. The second guy is scaled off of that, like a grading curve. So if the top guy gets a 10 and the second guy gets a 9, the second guy gets a 0.9. If the second guy gets a 5, then he gets a 0.5. Okay, so on to the list of the best QBs scaled of the 2000s.
Coming in at number 19 is Chad Pennington with a scale of 2.201. A career riddled by injuries limiting his true potential. He threw for 17,804 yards, 102 touchdowns with 64 picks, completing 66.1% of his attempts. Number 18, Aaron Brooks. Huge ups with a fast, steep decline, going from a constant top 10 QB to out of the NFL in 2 years. He threw for 20,261 yards, 123 touchdowns, or 92 picks, completing 56.5% of his attempts with a scale of 2.248. Number 17, Tony Romo. A late start is probably to blame for being seated so low, having to sit behind Vinny Testaverde and Drew Bledsoe. Tony still managed to sneak into the top 20 with only 4 years play, while the both of them are not even close to cracking the list. With a scale of 2.291 in those years, he threw for 15,045 yards, 107 touchdowns on 55 picks, completing 63.4% of his passes. Number 16, Carson Palmer. Playing since 2004 and even coming out on top in 2005, totaling a scale of 2.463, throwing for 18,724 yards, 128 TDs, 80 interceptions, completing 63.2% of his attempts. Number 15, Kerry Collins, with a scale of 2.497, the butt of a few jokes with some of the worst outings in grand stages. The man was at least reliable, throwing for 26,792 yards, 333 touchdowns, 112 interceptions, with a completion percentage of 57.6. Number 14, Phillip Rivers, with a scale of 2.610, starting 4 years in the 00s, grabbing the top spot in 2008, giving Manning one of his MVPs in one of the few years he wasn't the top spot in QVER. Rivers threw for 14,803 yards, 105 touchdowns, 44 interceptions, completing 63.2% of his passes. Number 13, Mark Bulger. Taking over for Kurt Warner, he got off to a hot start, but was another derailed by injuries. Mark played his entire career in the 00s, amassing 22,814 yards, 122 touchdowns, 93 interceptions, completing 62.1% of his passes with a scale of 2.657. Number 12, Dante Culpepper. With a scale of 2.704, Culpepper was a part of one of the most feared attacks of all time. Off-the-field issues quickly stopped this bright career in its prime. With 24,153 yards, 149 touchdowns, 106 interceptions, and a passing percentage of 63%, I'm putting this one on the Madden curse. Number 11, Rich Gannon, with a scale of 2.717. Gannon had a hard career, was moved around, injured, and never really shined until he got with Oakland, and makes the list despite only 5 seasons in the 00s and only 3 of them healthy, all while over the age of 35. Unfortunately, a Super Bowl win in this time had to be tucked away.
And now, entering the top 10.
The fuck was that? Anyways, we're starting this thing off with Steve Air McNair. With a scale of 2.844, McNair took his team to the Super Bowl and made Jeff Fisher actually look like a good coach. In this time, he put up 21,466 yards, 124 touchdowns off 83 picks, completing 62% of his passes. Number 9, Matt Hasselbeck, bald and beautiful, with a scale of 2.963, running many successful Seahawks teams and even making the Super Bowl. Hasselbeck proved to be a top QB of the time, throwing 26,433 yards, 162 TDs, 111 INTs, while completing 60.2% of his passes.
And coming in at number 8, Trent Green Acres.
The first one to cross 3 at 3.007, starting mainly for Kansas City. He was the reliable QB behind some of the scariest running attacks we've seen, throwing for 25,034 yards, 139 touchdowns, and 103 interceptions, completing 61.5% of his attempts. Number 7, Kurt Warner with a 3.664, having put up one of the greatest seasons of all time before injuries to everywhere, and finally his thumb made him more turnover prone and missed big chunks during what probably should have been his decade, throwing for 27,952 yards, 197 touchdowns, and 115 interceptions with a completion percentage of 65.6. Number 6, Jeff Garcia with a 3.682. Jeff in the first few years of the 2000s looked like maybe the next big Niners QB, putting up great numbers even in rocky seasons. But as the last people from those Super Bowl teams exited and after an arrest, Jeff was quickly given up on and shipped around the league, putting up solid seasons in bad situations each time his number was called. He threw for 22,993 yards, 150 touchdowns, 72 picks, and completed 61.8% of his passes. Number 5, Drew Brees with a 4.463, taking some time to land a permanent spot and given the full order to fire at will. This was a proving period for Brees, in which he stepped up and showed to be even better after he hit the age of 30. During this time, he threw for 30,425 yards, 210 touchdowns, 110 interceptions, and completed 64.8% of his passes. Number 4, Donovan McNabb with a 4.791 scale, taking his team to 3 straight NFC Championship games and a Super Bowl, with his best receiver being his running back most of that time. He also in 2004 became the first QB to throw for more than 30 touchdowns in less than 10 picks, throwing for 31,925 yards, 208 touchdowns on 93 interceptions, while completing 59.5% of his passes. Number 3. So 4 was 5, and now 3 is 4. Or should I say, Favre. Brett Favre. With a scale of 5.063, being a top QB for over 2 decades and breaking more fingers than the mob, Brett is the reason Aaron Rodgers missed the list. The man, it was too good for too long and would sit for nothing. The unabated gunslinger, throwing for 38,435 yards, 262 touchdowns, 176 interceptions, while completing 62.7% of his passes. Number 2, the comeback kid, Tom Brady, with a 5.195, who will be top 3 next decade's list as well, is a dragon, dominating and everlasting. Just don't let him touch me, I'm low enough as it is. Throwing for 30,838 yards in this time, 225 touchdowns, 99 interceptions, completing 63.4% of his passes. So now number 1, and it's not even close. Peyton Manning with an 8.25. The 00s were the time when Peyton looked unstoppable all up until he got into the postseason, where despite leading in QVER 4 out of the 10 available seasons and having 4 MVPs, he only walked away with 1 Super Bowl win, compared to 3 for his closest rival, who his younger brother had beat to grab the same amount of rings as him. But despite this, his greatness during the regular season in those years and the overall level of play he maintained was so high, we may never see a disparity like this again. Like and subscribe.